Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Saturday, July 12th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. For our listeners in Riverside, expect a high of 90.5 degrees Fahrenheit today, with the low dropping to 65.9 degrees. It's definitely a day to stay cool, perhaps by the pool or enjoying some air conditioning. Remember to keep hydrated and wear light clothing if you're planning on being outdoors for any extended period. Later in the program, we'll dive into the forces behind what is being described as a more aggressive Russia policy. We'll also investigate the unique challenges and hurdles facing housing reform efforts in California. Join us for these stories and more, just ahead on Alex's News. Stick around. Our top story this morning, we're tracking a significant shift in White House foreign policy, specifically former President Donald Trump's evolving stance on Russia's President Vladimir Putin. It appears the ongoing war in Ukraine is truly shaking things up on the diplomatic front. For more on this, we turn to our reporter Ethan. Ethan, what can you tell us about this pivot?
Grace, it's quite a departure from what we've seen in the past. Former President Trump has moved from a more conciliatory approach towards President Putin to one of sharp criticism and outright frustration. This shift, according to reporting from National Public Radio and WUJI 91.7 FM, indicates what they call sharp criticisms and a deteriorating relationship. Cap Radio also highlighted just yesterday, July 11, 2025, that Trump was turning sharply critical of Russia's Putin.
So what exactly is he saying now? Are these just nuanced diplomatic words, or is he being more direct?
He's certainly not pulling any punches, Grace. According to MundoDeportivo.com, Trump has reportedly accused Putin of talking, quote, bulls, asterisk, 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 end quote, about Ukraine. He's also expressed being, quote, very unhappy, end quote, with Putin, describing his words as, quote, meaningless, end quote. The rhetoric has really escalated. Following a major Russian airstrike against Ukraine in May, which caused significant casualties, MundoDeportivo.com reported that Trump even called Putin, quote, completely insane, end quote.
Those are some strong words. How has the Kremlin responded to these accusations?
Well, Grace, the Kremlin, through Press Secretary Dmitry Peskov, has publicly attributed Trump's strong criticism to, quote, emotional tension, end quote. This is according to various outlets, including the Moscow Times, Newsweek, Politico, Fox News, and Al Jazeera. Peskov suggests this tension stems from the extensive efforts made by both the U.S. and Trump personally to initiate peace negotiations. It seems they believe Trump's frustration is reaching a boiling point over the lack of progress.
It sounds like frustration is truly the key driver here. Can you elaborate on the specific reasons for this shift?
Absolutely. The primary reason for Trump's altered tone is his increasing frustration with the stalled progress in ending the Ukraine war and Russia's continued aggression. MundoDeportivo.com notes that despite U.S. brokered talks and Trump's personal efforts to push for a peace deal, Putin has reportedly not accepted proposals for an unconditional ceasefire and continues escalating attacks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, according to MundoDeportivo.com, has conveyed Trump's profound disappointment and frustration regarding Russia's inflexibility. This includes the intensification of Russian airstrikes, which NPR reports has left Ukraine relying on dwindling air defense munitions. WUGA, with a segment by Joanna Kakissis, also reported on Russia intensifying airstrikes to overwhelm Ukraine's air defenses, further highlighting the desperate situation on the ground.
Beyond the rhetoric, has this shift translated into any concrete policy changes?
It certainly has. Trump has initiated significant policy reversals. He ordered the resumption of weapons shipments to Ukraine, a move that followed a temporary pause by the Pentagon. MundoDeportivo.com reports this decision was made explicitly to allow Ukraine to defend itself against intensified Russian strikes, including drone bombardments. Trump specifically promised to send 10 Patriot interceptors to Ukraine and urged the Pentagon to ramp up armament production. He's also, quote, very strongly, end quote, considering supporting a new punishing sanctions bill targeting Russia, spearheaded by Republican Senator Lindsey Graham.
Ah, yes, Senator Graham's proposed, quote, Sanctioning Russia Act of 2025, end quote. What are the details of this legislation, and how soon could we see it move forward?
This bill, S-1241, is gaining significant momentum, Grace. According to Politico and Punchbowl News, it's expected to be considered for a floor vote in the Senate as early as the week of July 21st. That's just about 9 days from now. This bipartisan legislation, county-sponsored by Senator Richard Blumenthal, has garnered support from over 80 senators, with a companion bill introduced in the House. The most debated part is an unprecedented 500% secondary tariff on all goods and services imported into the United States from countries that knowingly purchase Russian energy. This tariff is primarily aimed at nations like China and India, making their trade quite a bit more expensive.
500% is an astronomical figure. What are the economic and geopolitical concerns being raised about such a high tariff?
Experts are definitely sounding the alarm, Grace. EconomicTimes.com and Britannica.com warn of potential, quote, trade chaos, end quote, leading to global trade collapse and severe supply chain disruption. They even cite historical precedents like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which saw global trade plummet by 65%. Economically, this would cause, quote, extreme, end quote, inflation and drastically increase consumer costs, essentially taxing the importing country's consumers, disproportionately affecting lower-income individuals. Geopolitically, experts worry it would provoke widespread retaliatory tariffs, potentially escalating into a global trade war, alienating key partners, especially in the global south. It might even push them closer to Russia and China.
Given these serious concerns, how are proponents of the bill addressing them? Is there any flexibility built into this, quote, bone-crushing, end quote, measure, as Senator Graham described it?
There is, Grace. Proponents are mainly relying on a broad presidential waiver authority, Section 17, letter D of the bill, as noted by hsfkramer.com and bhfs.com. This provision grants the president discretionary authority to exempt specific countries, goods, or services from the tariff if it's determined to be in the U.S. national security interest. This allows for 180-day deferrals, with the possibility of repeated deferrals subject to congressional approval. Senator Graham has also acknowledged the need for a broad carve-out for countries that provide aid to Ukraine, like the European Union, to spare allies from punitive tariffs.
That waiver sounds like a potential lifeline for trade. But does that flexibility dilute the bill's intended impact?
It's a bit of a catch-22, Grace. While necessary for flexibility, experts like those from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace are skeptical. They argue that frequent or widely expected waivers could dilute the bill's, quote, bone-crushing, end quote, credibility, reducing Russia's incentive to change behavior. Conversely, the mere threat of a 500% tariff, even with expected waivers, could be coercive. But the sheer threat could also cause significant global economic and geopolitical instability due to market uncertainty, potentially leading to long-term fragmentation of the global economy. The bill's path through the House is also less clear, with the House set to recess earlier in July and Senate Majority Leader John Thune emphasizing coordination with the White House and House for passage.
A truly thorny issue with a lot of potential tariffs. Ethan, thank you for breaking down this complex situation for us.
My pleasure, Grace.
When we come back, we'll shift gears to another breaking news story out of Silicon Valley. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. For our second story this morning, we're turning our attention to California, a state that has long grappled with an affordability crisis when it comes to housing. For years, outlets like LAist and the Morning Sun have described California as the epicenter of the nation's housing crisis. But now, it appears the state is taking a major structural step to address these deep-seated issues. For more on this, we turn to our reporter Chloe, who's been following the developments closely. Chloe, what can you tell us about this significant change?
Grace, it is indeed a landmark move. California is establishing a brand new, dedicated state agency, the California Housing and Homelessness Agency, or CHHA. This agency will focus exclusively on housing issues, a first for the state. This initiative comes directly from a proposal by Governor Gavin Newsom, who aimed to split the existing Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, known as BCSH. According to reporting from LAist, BCSH was previously criticized as an awkward grab bag and an island of misfit toys because it housed everything from affordable housing programs to horse racing oversight.
And, quote, island of misfit toys, unquote, certainly sounds like it needed a reorganization, so the governor's plan has been approved. When did this new agency officially get the green light to proceed?
That's right, Grace. Governor Newsom's plan received legislative approval right by its July 4th deadline, as the legislature did not veto the proposal. This allowed the creation of California's first housing-only agency to move forward, according to LAist. The reorganization officially went into effect the week of July 7, 2025. The current BCSH is actually slated for dissolution on July 1, 2026, which is about 354 days from now, when the two new agencies will formally take its place.
That's quite a transformation. What are the key goals and expectations for this new CHHA?
Well, supporters, including Ray Pearl of the California Housing Consortium, see this as a long overdue step that will elevate housing to a cabinet-level position. This means a direct advisor to the governor, aiming to bring much-needed order and efficiency to the state's very fragmented affordable housing funding programs, as LAist has reported. Governor Newsom's spokesperson, Tara Gallegos, emphasized this as part of his broader effort since 2018 to prioritize housing and homelessness. The overarching goal is to enhance coordination, reduce administrative barriers that often delay affordable housing projects, and ultimately increase the supply of affordable homes and address homelessness across the state.
That sounds like a tall order. Which specific existing departments and entities will the new CHHA be absorbing to achieve these goals?
The CHHA will integrate several key housing-related departments and entities under its umbrella. This includes the Department of Housing and Community Development, known as HCD, the California Housing Finance Agency, CalHFA, the California Interagency Council on Homelessness, CalICH, and the Civil Rights Department. For example, the HCD, established way back in 1965, develops housing policy and administers housing finance programs. CalHFA, established in 1975, provides low-rate housing loans and down payment assistance. Plus, there's a proposed new Housing Development and Finance Committee, the HDFC, within the CHHA. This committee is intended to act as a, quote, one-stop shop, unquote, to streamline and align timelines for funding project applications and awards for affordable housing. The aim is to drive down costs and accelerate construction.
A, quote, one-stop shop, unquote, for housing funds sounds like a dream for developers, but I understand there are still some significant hurdles. What are these limitations, particularly concerning funding?
You've hit the nail on the head, Grace. This reorganization is widely viewed as just the first step, according to LAist. A major challenge is that key funding sources for affordable housing, like federal tax credits and bonds, are managed by the independently elected State Treasurer's Office, currently Fiona Ma. These are handled through entities like the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee and the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee. This fragmentation across two constitutional officers is quite unusual for states. According to a UC Berkeley's Turner Center analysis, this adds an average of 4 months of delay and over $20,460 per unit in costs to projects. A Rand Institute report further highlights that affordable housing construction in California already costs more than 2.5 times more per square foot than in states like Texas and Colorado.
Wow, that's a significant cost increase and delay just due to the bureaucratic structure. Are there any efforts underway to bridge this divide between the governor's office and the state treasurer's office?
Yes, there are, Grace, though it requires what some are calling, quote, diplomacy. Unquote, legislation known as AB 519 created an affordable housing working group, which includes representatives from HCD, CalHFA, and the Treasurer's Committees. This group is mandated to report its recommendations for a single, consolidated application process to the legislature by July 1, 2026, again about 354 days away. The HDFC is also required to make recommendations by this date. Additionally, AB 2006 directed HCD, Cal HFA, and the Tax Credit Allocation Committee to enter into a Memorandum of Understanding by July 1, 2024, to streamline compliance monitoring for affordable housing.
So while the new agency is a big step, it sounds like some of the biggest housing nuts to crack are still in the works. What about addressing the broader, deeper root causes of California's exorbitant construction costs beyond just funding fragmentation?
Absolutely, Grace. The state is tackling those deep roots through a multi-pronged legislative approach. To streamline environmental review, new legislation, AB 130 and SB 131, signed into law on June 30, 2025, introduces broad exemptions for qualifying housing and infill projects under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. For local zoning restrictions, HCD is playing a critical role in reviewing local government's housing elements for compliance, with non-compliant jurisdictions facing potential withholding of state funding. There's also the, quote, builder's remedy, unquote, provision, which allows developers to bypass local zoning in non-compliant jurisdictions if projects include enough affordable units. And to tackle high land acquisition costs, Governor Newsom's executive orders and legislation aim to make excess state-owned and local public lands available for affordable housing. A digitized inventory of such land was released on July 1, 2024.
It sounds like California is really putting its best foot forward, or perhaps many feet, to address this crisis. Chloe, thank you so much for breaking down these complex changes for us this morning. It's clear there's a lot of work being done on the housing front.
My pleasure, Grace.
That was Chloe with an in-depth look at California's new housing agency. Here are some other headlines. First up, California aims to turn down the volume on streaming service ads. State Senator Tom Umberg's proposed law, SB 576, wants to keep those jarring commercials from being louder than the shows you're watching. The inspiration? His legislative director's infant daughter was literally woken up by a blaring ad. This bill, modeled after a federal law that tamed loud commercials on traditional TV, has already passed the Senate unanimously. While entertainment industry groups cite technical difficulties, Senator Umberg isn't buying it, quipping, "If they can make ads louder, they can make them less loud." If enacted, California would be the first state to set a precedent for quieter streaming, with services needing to comply by July 1, 2026. It certainly sounds like a bill many viewers would tune into. Meanwhile, in New York, a political tremor has been felt across the nation. Zohran Mamdani, a 33-year-old Democratic socialist, secured a stunning upset in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary, defeating former Governor Andrew Cuomo. This victory is being hailed as a seismic shift for progressives, prompting questions about its replicability. Mamdani's campaign resonated deeply by focusing on bread-and-butter economics, proposing ideas like freezing rents, free city buses, and childcare. His success was fueled by a massive grassroots movement and by leveraging ranked choice voting. While California progressives are doing some serious soul-searching and celebrating, eager to replicate this harbinger of change, the Golden State faces unique hurdles, including a different political landscape and the dominant influence of tech industry spending. It's a new chapter in progressive politics, and the country is watching. Across the country, we're following a truly heartbreaking story. A deaf Mongolian immigrant, Avermed, has been trapped in silence for over 4 months in Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, custody in California. He's been held without access to a Mongolian Sign Language interpreter, effectively in solitary confinement. Avermed, seeking asylum from persecution due to his disability, claims Customs and Border Protection agents refused to accept a letter explaining his situation at the border. Despite a federal judge ordering officials to provide him an interpreter and reevaluate his case, his sister describes him as being trapped in silence, pleading for fairness. This case certainly speaks volumes about the challenges facing vulnerable individuals navigating our immigration system. In Georgia, concerns are mounting over the detention of an Emmy Award-winning Salvadoran journalist, Mario Guevara. The Committee to Protect Journalists is calling for his release after he was arrested while live streaming a protest in Atlanta. Despite identifying himself as a journalist and wearing a press pass, Guevara, who has been legally in the U.S. for 2 decades, was initially charged with misdemeanors that were later dropped. However, new traffic-related charges were filed and also dismissed, yet ICE has issued a detainer and continues to hold him. A federal judge ordered his release on bond, but ICE has defied that order, listing him as not releasable. The CPJ emphasizes that Guevara is currently the only journalist in U.S. custody whose arrest is directly related to his work, arguing his continued detention is an attempt to silence a reporter and sets a dangerous precedent for press freedom. It's a challenging time for those reporting on the front lines of the truth. Finally, we turn our attention to Anchorage, Alaska, where the city is making strides in rebuilding its justice system. Following explosive reporting by the Anchorage Daily News and ProPublica, which exposed that over 1,000 misdemeanor criminal cases, including serious charges like domestic violence and DUI, were dismissed due to severe understaffing, significant changes are underway. Between May and October of last year, the municipal prosecutor's office couldn't meet Alaska's speedy trial deadline, leading to a cascade of dismissals and financial losses. But thanks to that in-depth reporting, the state stepped in. Now, Mayor Suzanne LaFrance has announced that Anchorage has successfully hired a full roster of 12 frontline prosecutors. The good news: the city is no longer dropping charges due to staff shortages, marking a critical step in serving justice and keeping Anchorage safe. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.